Norman A. Muehlenhard about his military experiences during World War II. He will start talking about his life at the time that he was drafted.
Thank you, Peg. At the time of this was 1941, and they were drafting people from for military service for 1 year. And it happened that my number came up. A group of my friends and neighbors and so forth selected me. Well, I was really planning on getting married, but the thing sort of upset me a little bit there. But I thought, well, I can wait a year. We were engaged, Eileen and I were engaged, and we decided to wait that year so the draft called me, I think it was January or June of 1941. And I went to a reception center, or initially at Cheviot City Hall, where there were a group of other men there in the same situation that I was. The only person I recognized there was a fellow by the name of Gene Bertzel. Now, Gene was a few years older than I, so he probably didn't know me, but I knew him because he was an excellent soccer ball player. And we talked about for a bit, but he was the only other person in that group that I knew. And we were then put on a bus, transported to Fort Thomas, Kentucky, and went through the normal physical examinations, and we were given a few written examinations too. And that evening I was able to get a pass to go home, but you had to have certain items with you before they'd leave you off the post, especially those things that might be helpful in sexual intercourse and so forth. They made sure that you had that equipment with you, and you were supposed to use it, I guess. But anyhow, the uniform they had, this is in June and the weather's hot. They had a flannel shirt and a cotton trousers and boots, and I wore that and took a bus somehow. I don't even remember how. Being a country boy, I didn't know a whole lot about changing buses and streetcars and that sort of thing, but I got home for one couple hours that evening and had to report back by 11 o'clock that night. Well, about 2 days, they had us all figured out, and they sorted us out, and I was chosen to go to the infantry. We were loaded on trains, and we went to Camp Walters, Texas. That's the mineral wells, and it was west of Dallas, Fort Worth, I'd say about 90 miles. And here the camp was brand new. We, until the battalion was full, they used to march us up these hills. We carried rocks down from off the hills to make sidewalks and steps and that sort of thing. And then eventually, of course, we went through the basic training for infantry replacement people. We were trained in heavy weapons, which is the mortars and machine guns primarily. And at this time, they really didn't have a real mortar for us to work with. we used a 2x4 or 4x4 as a tube, and we finally got to fire that thing from a real weapon. I think each of us got to drop one round in the tube. At any rate, after 13 weeks, they shipped us up to Fort Custer, Michigan, and we were to be in the 5th Division. Several of us, a number of us, in the 5th Division, which was a combination of Kentucky, Indiana, and Ohio people. Well, then they found out that apparently that they were overstocked with good soldiers like me. So they sent a group of us down to Fort Leonard Wood, which is southwest of Missouri, 100 and some odd miles, 136 miles southwest of St. Louis. And my training was in heavy weapons, I was assigned to a heavy weapons company. And here we practiced firing machine guns. We had a clever motor officer, or not a motor sergeant, that knew how to rig up a beam on a light beam on a machine gun. And we used to do, in the wintertime when it was inclement weather, we'd be in the barracks and we'd use this machine gun and point out targets and so forth and see whether we could hit that with that beam or not. So that was pretty good training. I never fired any more mortars. It was strictly a machine gun, heavy weapon, and a heavy machine gun, which was water cooled, 30 caliber, and you could fire those things pretty fast and long. So along came December 7, and the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. And things changed around the camp pretty rapidly then. We had to walk a lot of guard duty. We guarded railroad approaches to the camp. And I mean, they may have been around 20 miles away, especially the bridges and so forth. And this wasn't bad duty. I mean, that was pretty good. But I hated to walk through the newly constructed places that they had, buildings that they were building for housing officers, because there was a lot of ice, and anybody that was around there could hear you coming for miles. I think the ice would crush under your heels, and it was kind of a miserable sort of duty there. But anyway, eventually we had every Saturday we had inspections, and I told my younger brother, to bring my car down. This was before the Japs bombed Pearl Harbor, and I had an automobile, which was rather unusual, I guess, for an infantry private. And I got to know, or the upper echelons, the sergeants and the corporals, they liked me pretty well because I'd lend them the car, which was a foolish thing because those birds are regular Army guys, and they would go out and drink a little bit. And somebody told me that was happening, so I cut that as soon as I found that. Anyhow, I had good reports. I decided I was going to be the best individual that the Army ever had. I stayed with it pretty well, and I got good reports on my inspections all the time. So they asked me if I wanted to go to officers training school. And I didn't know what an officer I knew that what officers were, but I didn't know the responsibilities or anything like that. So I said, well, I'll give it a try. Sure enough, wasn't long till we went to Fort Benning and spent a really rigid 13 weeks down there. So in October of 42, I was appointed a second lieutenant infantry, and they shipped me up to Camp Robinson, Arkansas. At Camp Robinson was a replacement training center. We trained enlisted people and drafted people and gave them basic training in infantry tactics and so forth. This I did for quite a while, and then we went from different camps. Doing the same thing. I went from there to North Camp Robinson, and from North Camp I went down to Tyler, Texas, Camp Fannin in Tyler, Texas, and we're doing the same thing there. Anyhow, Tyler was a town where there's a lot of oil wells around there, and they also grew roses. It was known as a town of roses, and a town of I think it was 17 millionaires. And it was quite a nice little town. The only thing was that it was so full of soldiers you could hardly move. From there, I went back to Benning for an officer's training and maintaining motor vehicles, mostly the 6x6 trucks and that sort of thing. I thought, well, that's pretty good. And I went from there. I went back to Camp Fannin, but then they shipped me down to Camp. It was Camp Hood in those days, and in Texas. So I spent a lot of time there. Well, I got married on the way down. I got married in between the time I went to officers motor school, and had spent my honeymoon at Fort Benning or Columbus, Georgia. So then we shared bathrooms with other couples, and so forth. It wasn't a very acceptable type of honeymoon stuff, but it worked out, and I think we both enjoyed that, and we moved around quite a bit. But at any rate, eventually there came that order, to report to a certain place. I think the Fort Meade, Maryland, this one happened to be, and you get further instructions there. And I had a delay en route, I think of 4 days or something like that. So I went home. Eileen and I both went to my parents' home in Mount Healthy or Coleraine Township, and where I spent about 4 or 5 days up at Camp Kilmer. You weren't allowed to write that you knew the author of the trees or anything like that, And the thing was pretty deeply secret. But anyhow, the Germans had started to push a little bit, and we were bound for overseas. Got on a ship that was really transport. Not a troop transport, a freighter. And there were only 18 of us on board, and I was in charge of these 18 guys. Well, they weren't going any place, so there wasn't a lot to do except do a little exercise and so forth, keep shaped up. We landed in Southampton. I stayed in England. Stayed there one night, and we boarded a ship for France. And here we went overboard, you know, and down the rope ladders down onto the landing crafts. And we went across the channel and landed there at one of the beaches. I don't even remember which one it was anymore. But anyhow, we climbed up this hill, and they were soon lining us up. And then about a day later, we were on a train, put us on a train. I had a few men that I was supposed to take care of. When I tried to put them on these 40 and 8s, where the paratroopers were all on there, and they kicked my men back out. They wouldn't let us in, wouldn't let them in. And I don't know what they had, what they were so brave about, but I took our guys, and I told the conductor, I said, they're not going to let us ride with them. He said, well, you come on back here in the caboose. So I had, I think, 8 people or something like that. We all got in the caboose, and it was heated and everything. It had a coal stove in it. And we went up into Belgium, near Liège. And as we got off there, you could begin to hear the big guns going off, you know. And we spent a night. This was right before Christmas of 42, 41 again. 4. So we cleaned our weapons, and we were assigned weapons, and then they took us and put us on trucks, and we were assigned to certain units. So I was assigned to the 84th Infantry Division, 334th Regiment. When I reported there, they said, well, Lieutenant, it's too hot up there. We can't get you up there now to the line. I said, well, I think they had me in line for a company commander. I said, you know, I've never been on a maneuver. I did a lot of training and I know a lot of stuff, but I said, I don't know whether I'm capable of being a company commander or not. And so by the time they got me up there, they had another fellow that they wanted to promote. And I reported into a captain. Sorry about that. I can't remember his name. Sam Adams. Sam was a Georgia boy, and I found that he was more scared than I was. But there were other people there that had been through the battles before, and they kind of guided me, you know. My platoon sergeant was Harry Piper. He was a tech sergeant from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. He's a good man. He took care of me and told me to not dive for the ditches. He says the Germans got those mined all the time. He said, don't dive in those places. So this was during the Battle of the Bulge in the offensive. So we were now ready to make the offensive move and take the Germans. Instead of the Germans taking us, we were taking them. We were stopped on the very tip of that bulge, our division, the 84th Division. And we made our offensive through all those little towns that you heard about, Malmedy and all of that. And we finally got through. Then they took us out of the Battle of the Bulge. When we met up with Patton's forces there in Houffalize, that closed the gap, and we went back up to the northern sector again, where we were originally. So the war went pretty good from there on. It was, we captured town after town. We got stopped at the Rhine River where our division was chosen as deception troops. We had rubber tanks, all imitation stuff. They changed all the insignia on our jeeps and clothing. We wore 29 Old Hickory division patches, and we made them believe that we were really, really strong people. I mean, like we had a lot of troops. We had more troops than you could think about. All once the Remagen Bridge thing broke to the south of us, and the pressure kind of came off, and we marched right up to the Rhine River. I say marched, we fought right up to the Rhine River. Sam Adams, our captain, was hit there. Had a shot right through the buttocks. He had $1 million shot. Shot him right through the buttocks. Anyhow, they were keep pushing us, and he was sort of a funny guy. The radio says, let's get those troops going up there, So Sam says, give me that radio. He took it and he bounced it on the cinders. We were by a railroad track. He bounced it up and down until it wouldn't work anymore. But anyhow, that night we closed in at Mönchengladbach and a little town called Hamburg, which was just across the Rhine River from Essen. And they had blown the bridge before we got there, so we had a little rest. The 29th and whatnot crossed the river. The engineers laid a Bailey Bridge first, I guess, and then we were able to get everything across the river, our stuff across the river, and we marched on through. What's the name of the town where the Pied Piper played?
Hamlet. Yeah,
Hamlet. Yeah. We took those towns. Town called Big Town. We had 3 divisions there, and we were in the middle of that thing. And then eventually, we freed a lot of political prisoners at a place called Waldeneel. There was a bunch of, girls from Holland and Belgium and different places that the Germans didn't want to have running around or getting messages passed around. They were political prisoners. We also, from time to time, would run into Russian prisoners, and they had them sleeping in, like chicken coops and so forth. But the Russians were rather rude people, and the Germans and the civilians there complained that they were not very nice, that they were raping the ladies and whatnot. So we recaptured them, sent them back with other prisoners, and they didn't. And the Russians weren't particularly happy about going back to Russia. But then we went up to the Rhine, the Elbe River, and we still would get quite a bit of resistance from time to time, but we would make miles a day instead of maybe a yard, one little bit. Down in the Siegfried line, it was pretty tough going. And the Ardennes was simply miserable because of the cold weather and dodging the shells and whatnot. So it was a great day. They offered me when we were on the Elbe, they offered me a chance to go to the Riviera for rest and recreation. So I said, sure. They flew us down there in a military plane. And on the way back, an engine stopped. But these things were rugged, they could fly on one engine, so they turned around and we went back. And the only thing there was that we overstayed our leave about 1 day longer than we should have. But I was kind of nervous about that propeller standing up there doing nothing, you know.
Yeah, I bet.
The guy across the aisle who was a bald-headed colonel, sweat was coming out of his forehead or at the top of his head, I think. So I wasn't quite as nervous as he was, but I tried to light a cigarette for the pilot when he got out. My hand was going like this, so I wasn't doing too well. But then after we had the occupational duties, and our general saw to it that we had very good accommodations. So that was then we got to come home. Christmas, we were there yet Christmas of 45, but the January of 46 while we were on our way home. Voyage home was a rough one. Yeah. They broke a main line on that ship. So we were without power, and if you knew anything about sailing, you're supposed to cut those waves. Well, we were in the valley of those waves, and we'd go up and down, sideways. You know, it was a mean trip. We thought, oh, we survived the war, but we'll drown out here. So we did get home.
Did you remember the name of what ship you came home on?
W.W. Holland.
Was it?
The W.W. Holland, yeah. The chaplain wrote a little poem, "Oh, life is a pip on a Liberty ship," something like that.
I hadn't heard that one.
What is W.W. Holland? That's World War. What is the W.W.?
I don't know. That's just somebody's name. I don't remember the ship we went over on either, but it was a freighter. But the thing we came back on was a converted Liberty ship. Converted for troop removal. In fact, that's about
Where did you dock when you got home?
in the New York Harbor someplace.
Oh, were you?
And it was early in the morning, or about maybe 1 o'clock in the morning or something like that. And until we got off, first thing we wanted was they offered us milk. The other thing that we had a craving for was pineapple. Pineapple and milk. But we were fed pretty well. I mean, you know, when they could get it to us.
Yeah, right.
I never brought a lot of trinkets home like some of the guys. They had rifles and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
You had to leave that with the only transportation we had was in the kitchen. You know, they had the 3 ranges and whatnot.
Yeah.
And you had to leave the stuff with the cooks, and sometimes I guess it'd get lost. I didn't worry about having a lot of stuff. I did bring this old pistol, this new pistol back with me. My Sergeant Pfeiffer got that for me off of an officer, medical officer.
Was your family expecting you home?
I don't know. I called Dad that morning. I know I got him out of bed at 4 o'clock in the morning. I don't think he appreciated it a whole lot, but
Well, he was probably up at 5 anyhow.
yeah, he probably didn't go back to sleep after that.
How did you get? I guess you took a train home, or
Yeah, took a train home. Some guys hired cabs, taxi cabs, get a group together, and if they were going to the same town.
did you come in then down here at Union Terminal?
I was at Union Terminal, but my wife was in her hometown.
Oh,
So I just called as I went through, and I caught a train at the B&O Railroad, and it must have been a milk train. I guess I didn't look at when it would get there. I probably could have gotten another train later in the day that would have made much better time, because the B&O had some good service between here and St. Louis. And I would have gotten off at Washington, Pennsylvania, which is where I wound up. But that train I was on was stopped at it was a milk train. I mean, the milk cans really were out there on the platform as we drove, as the train came in.
well, you couldn't get away from that. That's where you started, wasn't it? On a milk farm.
Yeah.
And you tell me about your reunion then that you're having.
Oh, well, we formed a unit thing called the Rail Splitter Society. It was really organized over in Europe, but they've had a reunion every year since. Now I've made most every one since 1950s or somewhere in there. And this year we're going to be down at Nashville, Tennessee. And it's an rather exciting time. Although we have reduced numbers of people, where we used to get maybe 1,000, we've been down now to 290 something. And I think this year may be a little better. I don't know why, but I've heard that there's a lot of people coming.
Good. Good.
The grandkids bringing grandpas now, and of course grandma, if she's alive. And some of the widows come along too. But we've been all over. I mean, we've been to California a couple times, Reno, more recently at the country western place in Missouri. What is the name of the town? Branson. Springfield, Illinois, a couple times, which is going to be our home really, because this 84th Infantry Division was a Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's area. It was an Illinois Reserve Division. So the thought is that we'll wind up, we give all the memorabilia that we have is going to a unit there in Illinois, in Springfield, Illinois.
Huh. And your wife then, you said, lived around St. Louis.
My wife lived around Evansville, Indiana.
Huh.
North or west of there, I guess, or east of there, between Louisville and Evansville. Down in the coal mining areas, strip mine areas.
Yeah. Was she employed while you were gone, or?
Yeah, she was employed. She worked in the aircraft factory, making P-47s. She was a rivet, Rosie the Riveter. She backed rivets.
Good for her. That's somebody who they're also interested in, getting some information on for this veteran study.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's got little write-ups that they made about her because we were getting married,
Oh, did they?
Stuff like that out of the Evansville paper.
The Evansville Hilltop, huh?
More or less, huh? Evansville's a pretty good-sized town.
Yeah. That's great. Maybe I can talk to her then too about her Rosie the Riveter experience. What do they have? You say that, what was it, P-40? What aircraft plant was it?
P-47.
47.
Yeah. Thunderbolt, they were called the Thunderbolt. It was a fighter.
Was that in Evansville?
Just outside at the airport. I don't know where they built the airport for the factory, or whether they built a factory where the airport was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just right on Route 40. I don't know what the route number is. I-64 passes within a few miles of it at any rate.
Well, that's very good. And well, thank you for taking the time to do this. It was really, I felt very, very interesting. And also, I found it kind of interesting that your wife, while you were away, and jeopardy certainly, and she was working there at she was a Rosie the Riveter.
Yeah,
Did she have a number in that club? Do you know?
No, I
Rosie
don't
the
think
Riveter?
so.
Yeah. Okay.
Not the Rosie the Riveter exactly, but she's got a couple of articles that she's kept.
Yeah. Okay. I want to thank you for your time.
Okay.
And, all the things you brought to show me and the pictures you're going to allow me to copy. That will be very, very helpful. It really will. And I want to thank you again. Okay, is there anything you would like to add before we sign off?
Not really. It was quite an experience, and I had toyed with staying in the service after But when they called from Regiment and said, Lieutenant, the division's going home. Do you want to go with us? I said, sure, pull that thing. I had made an application to stay in. I'd have probably wound up like a major because I didn't have a college education, you know.
Well, you already were a captain, right?
Yeah. Well, that was terminal leave.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Discharged as a captain. And then when I went on active duty with the reserve, like the 2-week duty at Fort Knox, I got the captain's pay, Yeah. And the weekends, some weekends we'd have problems.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And I enjoyed it. Was Bob already? Well, yeah, he was in the service then at that time. How many of your brothers were in the service at the same time as you?
There were 3 of us at one time.
Okay.
My younger brother Bill was in the Coast Guard, which doesn't mean he was guarding the coast here. He was out on the high seas most of the time.
Yeah.
And probably in as much danger as I was all the time, subject to fire.
Oh, sure. Well, again, I want to thank both you and your brother Bob here, and I'll see you at the Historical Society.
Fine.
My name is Margaret A. Lostro, and I will be doing an interview with Robert J. Muehlenhard and Norman A. Muehlenhard, that are brothers, at my home at 3738 Yellowstone Drive in Colerain Township, Cincinnati, Ohio, 45251. The purpose of this interview is to get on record, historical record, their remembrances of their days in Colerain Township from childhood on up. And then we will take a slight break, and they will tell us about their experiences during World War II. The date is August the 22nd, 2006. And we are at my home for the interview. Bob, would you like to start this and tell us a little bit about the history of Colerain Township?
I suppose, yes, I would like to start. My background is that my mother and father both lived in Colerain Township, and I came along. I'm the third oldest in a family of 6, and I was born at home, as were 5 of us. My youngest sister was born in the hospital. Midwife, of course, helped my mother, and the doctor lived in Mount Healthy. He was there for the deliveries, and we lived in a nice farm home. It was a beautiful setting, really. Back off the road some 1,500 feet, but road was in good repair. In fact, it was in better repair than the public roads were at that time. We had no running water, except we did have a pump in the house that was connected to the cistern, so we didn't have to go outside and carry water in. Had the old outhouse, naturally. Food was raised on the farm. Dad was a dairy farmer. His folks used to run a butter route. My dad bought the property off of his folks, and his folks used to run a butter route down through the Mohawk Valley, down in that area. All Germans, of course. And my dad also came from a family that spoke nothing but German until he was 7 years old, and yet on his voice you couldn't detect the German accent at all. So I managed to survive, and we, as I say, we were rural, and the work was there was a lot of hand work done. My dad was mechanically minded, and he switched over more and more toward mechanical things as he could afford, and as life went on. And of course, my mother had to work hard. You can imagine with in my case, the third child coming along. We wore a lot of hand-me-downs. We never really had a lot of money, but we did have a nice big area to romp around and grow up in. Went to the one-room school, Round Top, which is located on Round Top Road, and that I spent 1 year there in the one-room school, and then went to New Burlington for a second and third year, and then after that, the Colerain School in 1923 was centralized, and all the one-room schools were shut down. I never will forget riding the bus to school. We thought that was a big thing. We always had that 1,500-foot walk from the house to the road every morning, rain or shine. But our father would take us down to wait for the bus. I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. I want to go back to when we went to the one-room school. many times we walked that. It was about 3 mile by road, and of course being a guy that wasn't afraid to walk through the fields, learned a shortcut which cut it down to probably 1.5 miles. And a fellow by the name of Bill Shawn used to take us home. Dad would usually see that we got there. He'd pick up, he had a daughter that attended, a daughter by the name of Elizabeth that went there also. And Dad would pick us all up in the morning as a rule and haul us over there. But many times we walked home. And on bad weather, Bill Shawn would come over and get us and deliver us home and take his own daughter home. So the school was heated by a wood-burning stove that sat in the middle of the room, and a long pipe that led over to the chimney, which was at the side of the house. Of course, that gave up an awful lot of heat. But I just can't remember too much about being cold in there. I know that one morning the stove broke down, and my dad fixed it up by using a couple of brick and putting the grate up, and that got us through the day anyhow. I don't remember what we did after we went to the bathroom about washing our hands. I was trying to recall that. We did drink, however, out of a common bucket or common cup with water supplied by the neighbor's well. The neighbor's name was Walter Zellner. That's where the retirement, what we call it, the rest home is today. And he had a nice little place there. He himself had, I think, 6 daughters and 1 son. The son was the youngest born. I guess after all those tries for a boy, he decided he better quit with 7. So they furnished us the water, and we had school there. And one teacher, there were 3 in my class in the 1st grade. There was 1 in the 8th grade, I believe. We'd march up front, sit on a long bench. And the teacher would teach us our lesson. We'd be discharged and with our papers and whatnot, with instructions of what to do for the next couple of hours. So then we went to New Burlington. That was pretty much a repeat of what we have, what I just told you here of our one-room school. Then the centralized school came in.
Where was New Burlington School located?
You know where the current school is in New Burlington?
Mm-hmm.
Right there. Right next to it was a blacksmith shop. Yeah.
Adolf
Bobinger. And it's quite interesting, I think, to watch a blacksmith work. He was of course, a German man, a short, stocky man. Of course, one of the jobs of a blacksmith in those days, they were also furriers. They shoed horses. And my dad used mules, and I can't remember him ever putting a shoe on a mule. Oh, yes, I did. One of the mules had foot trouble one time, but he put the shoes on himself. Well, at any rate, from then on, we went to the centralized school starting in 1924. Everything was in one school. And that was the year, I guess I missed more time that year than, well, I did miss, I bet I missed over half the session because of sickness. All these people thrown together from the rural areas, and scarlet fever, mumps, measles, everything else. And of course, being of a large family and 4 of us going at that time, what one didn't get, the other one did, and then brought it home, and the rest of us had it. And during that period also, the dad, being a dairy farmer, was not allowed. He could feed the animals, and he could do everything with the animals except milk. This was an effort, of course, to prevent the spread.
That's during the scarlet fever time.
Yeah, during the scarlet fever. And this made it inconvenient, but they managed to get through it. So, and we wore a lot of hand-me-downs. My mother was continuously altering clothing or even changing the dyes on them. I don't know how in the world she ever got everything done that she did. So in school life, I went on up through the school system and graduated from Coleraine High School in 1934. I did, however, remain in the fourth grade an extra year, which maybe wasn't too bad because it gave me another year of growth when it came to athletic time in the school. I had a year's extra growth and whatnot experience, and that makes a big difference in high school, one year to the next. So graduated in 1934, and that summer I worked out. I hired out to a fellow by the name of Harry Zellner. I got $20 a month in my room and board. And this was a lot different than dairying. And of course, I was coming up to where I wanted to be on my own. And I did this primarily to learn the business. Dairy business costs a lot of money to go into, whereas the gardening business, such as he had, growing potatoes, cabbage, tomatoes, beans, and whatnot, required a lot of work, but it didn't require the investment. Well, as luck would have it, the following summer or the following spring, somewhere in March, got on at Procter & Gamble and spent the rest of my life there. So I was 19 years old when I was working at Procter & Gamble, and they were very good to me. Now, let's see what other things we want to talk about. As far as entertainment goes, Sunday afternoon, it was usually, we'd get a call from Charlie Timmerman. He'd come over here and we'll play cards or whatnot. And Timmerman, they were carpenters, and I might say more of the cabinet making variety. They did very nice work. And that was a Sunday afternoon that we happened to be, or that we would be home. On the other hand, we always had a lot of company. For some reason, people would come there on Sunday. And later on, now that I'm as old as I am, later on I found out that a lot of those people that came were relatives. I didn't know that. But they would come out there and they always enjoyed, and many of them would stay to eat the evening meal there. And of course, TV has spoiled all this sort of visitation today. And of course, better transportation. Back in those days, you traveled mainly by horse and buggy. My grandfather used to drive his horse from his place on Springdale Road, his place being right where right next to the Coleraine Township Trustees building there. He would drive from there to our house with his horse and buggy. And of course, the thing to do there, they unhitch the horse and tie him to the buggy and throw him a little feed, entertain himself for the day. Well, see, I'm running out of words a little bit here, Norm. We had plenty of room to play ball, though, and the object we had our limits, like you have walls around the stadiums today. Well, the barn was one of our limits, and if you could hit that ball over the barn, you were doing pretty good. But you better watch it as it went over the barn, or you wouldn't be able to find it. I mean, watching which direction it was, so you could get out back there in that little field and find the ball again. You know, we didn't have too many of these balls to play with, I'll tell you. And most of them, we many times made our own balls even. Take a cork and then start unraveling a sock, keep wrapping and tape that. So you see, there's many ways you can get around. Today, kids that would have to do something like that, I guess, would feel that they were living in poverty. And maybe we were, but we didn't realize it. So as far as going to a movie, I don't believe I saw my first movie till I was about 14 years old. And I'm trying to recall the name of that movie. It's a very famous one. And I remember...
You remember where it was?
Comedian, I know.
Yeah, it was that shipwreck. Voyage... Not how long. At any rate. We still didn't see too many movies after that, but that was my first one. And sound movie had just came in at that time. The older movies, such as we used to see once in a while at school, were black and white with captions. And well, this was a black and white movie too. But then you can imagine when movies became colored, like more natural, what a big improvement that was. So, Norm, if you want to take over a little bit, I'm kind of
Okay.
grabbing here.
Bob's covered our basic boyhood things, you know. The farm was over on Pippin Road between Adams Road and Springdale Road, and was on the west side of Pippin Road. As he mentioned, it was a pretty nice location. The drive came off of Pippin and wound up a hill with a couple of bends that, when it snowed real good and blowed, it drifted real well. And Dad told me when I was born in January 31, 1918, that when I was born, he had to go out to Pippin Road and bring the doctor in with his horse and buggy. So, and I remember Pippin Road as being a semi-paved. If there were a rut in the hillside or something, there at Pippin, right where the west branch of the Mill Creek comes across Pippin, the northern part of the west branch, that had a concrete bridge there. And the water overflowed through that bridge, and it created a little hole there that we made a swimming pool out of. It was big enough that you could make several strokes across there as a youngster to get across that pool without touching bottom. So it was an interesting thing there. The other thing is that it had a large growth of poison ivy there. And sometimes we'd get a patch of poison ivy from being around that place. But Pippin Road was rather a limited road. Very few people went. Today it's a main north-south artery. And I would expect that in the future that they're going to widen that even more than it is now. But it didn't go all the way through to Banning Road as it left Compton Road. It ran up to the top of the hill and then quit there because there was like a landslide. They could never fasten, never stabilize that place beyond the hill on the other side, because that was what we call Compton Creek ran down through that area. There used to be like little falls. There were flat rock in there, and there were falls, and it was a pretty nice spot. Some of those places, old Bill Schoen owned both sides of that creek. And he used to have little parties and stuff down there. I think maybe he had a little
a little concession stand.
Yeah, in the summertime. But for fun, well, we had manure carriers that carried manure out of the stables out into larger piles. We used to ride those litter carriers out and push them out and bring them back in, you know. One time I fell off and they scared the dickens out of the rest of the family because they figured I really got hurt. It was a pretty good drop off of that thing. We had high beams in the barn that we used to climb up on, you know, and then jump on down to a pile of hay or something like that. We had carriers, hay carriers at fork where you stick a fork that we didn't have baled hay. We had loose hay, and we We would bring it in on a wagon or a couple wagons at a time, stick these forks down in there, and then the horses would pull the carrier up to a thing and to a track, and when that hit that carrier, it snapped, and then it would pull the hay back off to the loft that you wanted to store the hay in. But Bob mentioned there came a day when they centralized schools. He said that they closed all the one-room schools, but I think they still had one up in
Pippin Road.
What do we call that area?
Pleasant Run.
Pleasant Run area that was open, and so I started in the centralized school the first year it opened. Our class 1936, which started there. I think we have a few people left today yet that were started with the school together. But this was quite a mix of people, and I knew very few people in that class except some immediate neighbors. And when neighbors were, like if you went by the road, their nearest neighbor probably was 2,000 feet or something like that, while other neighbors were over a mile. That we used to get together on Sunday, take the scooters and scoot along Compton Road, Pool Road, Cheviot Road, and back West Road and around like that. We'd scoot all the way around there. And Pat Slattery, and to name a few, was a guy we called Pat Slattery. His real name was Howard Slattery, who in later life became a air traffic controller. George Kuhn, who was really involved with the Historical Society, Coleraine Township, Coleraine Historical Society. He was another neighbor. And I guess I went all the way through school, and I never had to repeat a grade, but I kind of wish I had, because I think I could have learned I could have done a little better in school than I did. Especially I was weak in math. I loved history, languages, that sort of thing. And I did better in that, and also general science. We had something called general science, remember? And we used to talk about that while we were milking the cows. Bob was the source of a lot of information at that time, really. But we had a good time. And eventually, as he said, he got a job with Procter & Gamble. And we had some bad years on the farm because of the dry weather drought, similar to what we're having right currently. Mm-hmm. And Dad says, well, looks like we're not going to do so well. He says, if you can get you a job in town, why go get it? So I applied, and wasn't very long that I got accepted. Got a job with Procter & Gamble, primarily night cleaning up the machinery after the day's work was completed. And then later on, I was a continuous crutcher checker, which checked the amount of soap that flowed through. They were continuous. Otherwise, we mix a batch of soap and then dump it, But these things fed certain amounts of preservatives, of I say flavors, I mean scents, and that sort of thing. And that was my job to check to make sure that they were producing or emitting the proper amounts. into the final product. So that's where I was when I got that knock from Uncle Sam. That was in 1941. So I expect that if there's something else you would like to know.
Tell me about the bootleggers you said were around.
Oh, the bootleggers. Well, we'd hear all kind of stories about them. They done not only bootleg booze and illegal liquors, but sometimes there was people that would hijack large shipments of cigarettes.
Oh, really?
And there's a few barns, I think maybe a barn that's still standing today that I heard that that from this barn, that's where the distribution took place. I won't mention any names because I may be wrong. Total thing may be wrong, but the bootleggers lived right here. The bootleggers that I can remember lived and worked out of Coleraine Pike near the big spring, or opposite and south of where Stalin's are today.
Was that where the Beavis Hotel was?
It was on the other side of the road.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, the house was. Ori Bowles, was that who
Oh,
we
yeah,
used
he
to
was
know?
in my class.
And but anyhow, that was an exciting time because this is the time that Zwick, was that Zwick or Zwicker? Zwick.
Zwick, yeah.
They had, that sort of ruled the Cincinnati area. They eventually caught him in Chicago carrying a machine gun inside of a violin case. Shot him.
I think, just pardon me a minute here, but
Yeah.
I think it's important to remember that at this time yet, we had no telephone.
Yeah.
We got a newspaper which was mailed to us, and the mail was delivered once a day, so that news was always a day late. And our news came from the guy that picked up the milk. That was one source of it, and chatting with the neighbors. And so many of these things probably were hand me down, and probably didn't lose too much in the passing down. But go ahead now, Mark.
That's all right, fine. These people killed a guy. What was his name over in patrolman? Not a patrolman. What do they call him? A liquor agent or something.
Revenuer, I guess it'd be.
Revenuer.
Expression.
Over in North College Hill, and they played a Victrola. You know what a Victrola is?
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's something we had back in those days too, and a player piano, you know. Well, I took a shot at music too one time.
Oh, did you?
I had a girl, a neighbor girl, her name was Ruth Timmerman, and I studied the piano for a while. But I guess I didn't spend enough time at practicing to make it really anything. But I still remember those days, and I like music.
That's good.
But that takes me up to about the time I was drafted into the military.
You
Okay.
might extol too that what we were expected to do in the home.
Oh, well, each of us had an assignment, and as for instance, I fed the chicken and gathered the eggs. We had a multiple farm, and
I pumped the water.
Bob pumped the water.
Herb took care of the horses.
And then also I think you had to make sure the hay got down the chute
Right.
so Dad would feed it to the cattle, and then in the evening at nighttime I think we had to make a double batch of hay, because then he fed them after they were all done
Right before
milk.
we went to bed, yeah.
And oh yeah, and the old cow stable had wooden troughs or mangers, and then we one time got ambitious and we had concrete troughs put in, and then we would run the water down the trough so the cows had water for them almost all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And we also put concrete block up so the stable would be a little warmer in the winter.
Oh, yeah.
But it was after the farm. During my senior year, one of our teachers, Alice Latcha, her name was then, took me home, and when we had wound up the hill and came off to the level up where the house was located, she says, "Well, now this is what I call a farm." Yeah.
As I said, it was a picturesque setting, really.
Oh, I bet it was up in there.
Silos, couple barns, and we had wheat shed. And threshing was always a great time on the farm. Threshing and butchering, we used to butcher and kill our own hogs, and
Silo filling also.
silo filling, yeah, that's when Grandpa used to come over and stay overnight. And we put his horse in the stable then. Yeah, great times.
Great. Bob, there's one name you mentioned I was wanting to get a little bit more information on. You mentioned somebody named Bobinger.
Yeah, Adolf Bobinger.
Adolf? Uh-huh. Did he have sons?
Yes,
Yeah.
he had several. In fact, his one son ran that Mount Healthy garage up there for a number of years. My
Okay.
uncle owned the area, but he rented out the repair portion to Adolf Bobinger,
Uh-huh.
Jr.
Adolf was a blacksmith,
Oh, he was about
the old man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The father, yes.
The reason I ask is that my mind goes different directions in history. And we were donated over in Green Hills this portfolio that the man that was hired from the government to do land maps of that whole area, go and clear up to St. Francis Seminary in that area. His name was Bobinger. I was wondering if he might be one of the sons of this Adolf.
I doubt it.
Or it might be Eddie Bobinger, Norm.
No.
Well, Eddie worked for down the courthouse, really, reproducing maps mainly, and that's.
Oh, maybe it was then.
It could have been.
Oh, the one that used to live over in
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's the one I was wondering.
He was in the engineers department,
Yeah, he was in the engineering department.
But gee, that area was this prior to Evergreen? Green Hills
That was, yes.
was prior to Green Hills, so I would think
No, because he's about
he
my age.
may have been Ed Behringer's dad, though.
See, when they bought up Green Hills,
That would
How
have been
old were
about
we then?
1935.
35.
A little earlier than that, wasn't
Oh, yes, it was.
No, I believe that was the right time because I remember, they had wanted to get Dad's place under contract
it?
too.
Yeah.
Frederick Smith went through and $10 or $15 he'd get a contract to sell the place. Well, when the government they bought off of Frederick Smith, and he got a commission on it.
Right.
Or they did.
Okay. I was just curious as to whether there would be a connection.
There was a Bobinger that owned Standard Publishing Company too.
Didn't know that. See how
He
history
lived on
goes?
Adams. He lived on Adams Road over in Springfield Township, though. right on top of the hill. Remember where Dave Shield lived?
Mm-hmm.
And well, sort of on the opposite side and north just a little bit.
Okay. Huffmeyer's place, huh? Huffmeyer's old place. Around that
No,
area.
this is on Adams.
Well, yeah, well, Huffmeyer curve there. Shield was here, and Bovinger, and Huffmeyer was around the corner there. You remember Huffmeyer?
Well, that was Miles Road you're thinking of.
Oh, yeah. You're right.
That'd be the right area.
Yeah, but
Okay. I think we'll take a slight break here and then we'll get into your military history, if that's all right with you.